Tēnā koutou, haere mai, and welcome to this Apec virtual media event, our first for 2021. I am Jahan Casanata, your MC today. A very warm welcome to our media here in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington, and also a special welcome to our media joining us virtually from across the region. It's really great to have you all here today. So as Apec's work gets underway this year, there are so many challenges to address. The pandemic, of course, along with issues like climate change and growing protectionism. For the economies that are united by the Pacific Ocean, there has never been a more important time to join, work and grow together. During Apec 2021, literally thousands of officials will be working together virtually across 11 separate time zones to bring this agenda and this conversation to life. Today is your chance to ask your questions around New Zealand's objectives for its host year. So shortly I will introduce Apec's 2021 SOM Chair, Vangelis Vitalis, and Apec's Executive Director, Dr. Rebecca Santa Maria. She will be joining us virtually today as well. Both of them will share some short remarks about the coming year. Then we'll have time for your questions. We have about half an hour for this. So many of you have submitted these already. I would ask you to please unmute yourself if I call on you to ask your question, and then remute yourself after asking that question. Everyone else, it would be great if you can keep your cameras on. It's really good to be able to see you on our screen here in Wellington. If you would like to submit a question as part of this media event, it is not too late. You can use our direct message function to reach the Apec media team here in the capital. So you will find them at the top of the participants list. Just click on the circle icon around Apec NZ Media Team and submit your question. So please tell us your name, your media organisation and what you would like to ask. Now rest assured, if we don't get to your question in this session, the Apec Media Team will follow up with you after the event with the information you have requested. So let's kick off with a short video. This is a bit of a taste of what New Zealand has to offer during its host year.
Kia ora. I'm Jaden from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Kia ora is a Māori word for saying hello, down here in the economy that is lucky enough to be hosting Apec 2021. Just not actually down here. Like you, we were ready to welcome everyone to our homes, to give representatives of all 21 Apec economies a taste of who we are. But also like you, we are determined to support the global COVID response. And that's why you're viewing us like this, virtually. Are you ready? Let's go. Welcome to your virtual introduction to Aotearoa, New Zealand. We are people of open hearts, where you will be welcomed as part of a community that believes in bringing people together. This is how we will all join together. We are people of open minds, where different views are shared and supported, and hard work and teamwork is encouraged. This is how we will all work together, all the while embracing and leading technology that helps push the world forward positively. Boats that fly, what's next? This is how we will all grow together. Join, work, grow together. Pretty important words, aren't they, Prime Minister?
They really are, Jaden. As we plan for recovery from COVID-19, it is economic cooperation through Apec, the most dynamic region in the world's economy, that will help us all rebuild. Like never before, the scale of the challenges the world faces today requires us all to work together for the greater good. We will create an environment where connections can be made and Apec's important work can continue, including progress on sustainability, ensuring widespread adoption of digital tools to drive productivity, and developing inclusive plans that create opportunities for all our people. To all the 2021 Apec delegates, we look forward to providing a warm welcome to Aotearoa, New Zealand, virtually, as we join, work, grow together.
Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Yes, so a great snapshot there of how New Zealand will be welcoming its delegates virtually this year. So let's hear now from our first speaker. Vangelis Vitalis is APEC's 2021 SOM Chair. Now, the SOM Chair position is appointed by the host economy to support the preparation of APEC's policy agenda and also to coordinate the work of senior officials. Vangelis is also the Deputy Secretary of the Trade and Economic Group at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's had an impressive career working as an economist and a trade expert within the ministry, but also at global institutions like the OECD and the World Economic Forum. A very warm welcome to you, Vangelis. Thanks for being here.
Many thanks. Thank you. So, thank you all. Very warm welcome, very warm New Zealand welcome to you all. Really nice to see you. I thought what I'd do is I'd talk a little bit about the context for the way in which we're thinking about how we host our year. And then talk specifically about what the New Zealand priorities are going to be. So the first thing to say is that this is certainly going to be a challenging year. To state the obvious, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty to manage around the health crisis that we face, but also the economic consequences of that crisis in terms of both trade, but also the feedback loops back into our domestic economies. And that's within economies across our region, but also across the region itself. The second contextual point I want to make is that the assumptions that have governed the way we think about integration across our region for the last 30 years are really under tremendous strain. Most obviously, the rules-based system is under pressure. Second, there is rising protectionism. We are seeing a second wave of protectionism across our region, unfortunately driven by the pandemic. And that's one of the things that we're going to need to deal with. In fact, this has been the sharpest spike in protectionism since the establishment of the World Trade Organization in 1995. The third kind of working assumption that we've had is the social license for integration across the region would be sustained, but that's clearly under pressure as well. It has not just been driven by COVID, but it's certainly exacerbated by that situation. And then we have APEC itself, this institution that we care a lot about and is so fundamental to New Zealand's prosperity, has had its own challenges over the last 3 years. In 2018, leaders were not able to agree a consensus statement. In 2019, the meeting had to be cancelled of leaders. And then in 2020, Malaysia had to switch to a virtual year about 1/4 of the way through their hosting itself, which imposes its own serious challenges. But we have Malaysia to thank for the fact that we got a consensus leaders statement. We also got a very important statement called the Putrajaya Vision for an open, dynamic, resilient region. And that Putrajaya Vision, a one-page, crisp, sharp document, is the task of New Zealand to convert now into an implementation plan for 21 economies for the next 20 years. And that brings me to the New Zealand priorities. That is our overwhelming priority, is to deliver something for the 21 economies in APEC, an implementation plan that works for 20 years, that covers the broad range of issues that the Putrajaya Vision has provided us. Turning then to the very specific New Zealand priorities for our year, they are essentially in 3 areas: the classical trade and economic issues, the second is the digital and innovation area, and the third, of course, is sustainability and inclusion. So starting with the classical, the bits that APEC is most well known for, the economic structural reform element. So this year, one of our big tasks is to deliver an economic structural reform instrument to refresh that, so that will be the 2021 deliverable of the big economic piece of work. In the trade area, there are several important elements that we're going to be working on. First of all, APEC traditionally has been a very strong supporter of the multilateral trading system, and we'll be wanting to send a very positive, strong signal, including through the ministerial that our Minister of Trade will host in the middle of the year. And I should also say that we are in a very important year for APEC. The APEC leaders meeting will happen just before COP26 for the climate change meeting, but also ahead of the WTO Ministerial Conference meeting at the end of the year. So APEC is, as always, well positioned to contribute those big ideas to that. And in the trade and economic area, we have a number of ideas that we would like to take forward, including both to respond to the immediate crisis that we face. So to do something about medical products, how do we move them around? How can we ensure vaccines flow across our region as quickly as possible? And how can trade enable that? The other area that we're certainly wanting to work on is the role of the free trade area of the Asia Pacific. So we have some building blocks starting to emerge. We have CPTPP, we have RCEP. APEC is the cement that binds these building blocks together that we want to build on and create the foundation for a prosperous and dynamic region, as leaders have agreed through the Putrajaya vision. Turning to the digital and innovation space, you heard the Prime Minister talk about how important that is. One of our big challenges, of course, is to make sure we take the opportunity that the digital revolution, in a sense, has driven as a consequence of the pandemic. Literally hundreds of thousands of small and medium enterprises have moved onto digital platforms, and that has given them access to bigger, new and important markets across our region that simply were not available to them before the pandemic hit. Unfortunately, too, though, one of the challenges that the digital revolution is providing is the risk of a widening digital divide. We know that women, Indigenous communities and remote and rural communities have been hardest hit by the pandemic, and that digital divide is something we're going to need to think very seriously about. In practical terms, what is it that we can do in our APEC year? Well, some of the things that APEC does very well is it creates templates that then become the new standard across the region. So, for example, electronic certification. It is a sad state of affairs that during the pandemic, we were able across our region to accept electronic certificates. When you sent your product across a border, you could then send an electronic certificate because it was no longer safe to move paper across borders. Unfortunately, many economies in our region are returning to the paper-based system. That adds transaction costs and that adds real costs to doing business across the region. So we want to be using APEC as a way of driving change that is sustainable across that area. And then finally, in the sustainability and inclusion space, we have a very busy working agenda here. Clearly, we want to advance the La Serena roadmap for women's economic empowerment. Our focus this year will be very much on the concrete policy deliverables and how that can be reflected in the implementation plan. So obvious things like women's representation, pay equity, those kinds of challenges that we need to deal with both within our economies but also across them as well. No surprise too that for New Zealand the Indigenous economy is an important element of our agenda this year. We'll be working with others to find ways to bring that to the attention of the 21 economies, because we ourselves know how crucially important the Indigenous economy is, the Maori economy is, of course, to New Zealand's growth prospects. There'll also be a food security ministerial, so a very important event where we get to talk about how does food move across borders, and are we able to ensure that the people across the region, the 21 economies, have access to safe, high-quality food, and that we are making sure that the enabling environment exists to drive that forward. And then finally, in climate change, specifically identified in the Putrajaya vision, what is it we might be able to do together in that space? And there's at least two big initiatives that we want to advance together with our counterparts in the 21 economies. And that includes environmental goods and services. APEC is still the only international institution that has an agreed list of environmental goods. So things like solar panels, wastewater management systems. Can we expand that list? Could we agree also to add to that environmental services, to make this a contribution from APEC to fit into the idea that APEC is an incubator of good ideas, and to take that forward into the wider agenda, including as a contribution to the WTO process, but also to COP26, the climate change conference, which is so pressing and urgent ahead of us. So look, let me stop there. I hope I've given you a sense of the context in which we're operating, the challenges we face, but also both the responsibility that New Zealand feels to deliver a responsive and relevant organisation, but also to deliver concrete, meaningful outcomes that drive change across our region, that benefit all of our people, consistent with what leaders asked us to do through the Putrajaya vision. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Vangelis Vitalis. Thank you for your comments there, and please stay with us and take some questions shortly. Let's move on now to our next speaker. Dr. Rebecca Santamaria is the Executive Director of the Apec Secretariat. She's based in Singapore. In her role, Dr. Rebecca advises and provides support to Apec's 21 diverse member economies. Now, prior to this, she was a top civil servant and trade negotiator in her native Malaysia, and she played a key role in Malaysia's participation in multilateral trade and cooperation. Dr. Rebecca, it's great to have you with us. Over to you.
Kia ora, and good morning and good day to all of you. Thank you so much for the kind invitation for me to share this stage with Vangelis. He's done a very good job explaining what we're going to do this year. I have not much to add, just to say this. the success of APEC really comes in when we are faced with crisis. And we saw it last year. There are two important realizations that happened last year. One is that we can do this. The multilateral economic cooperation and the APEC process can flourish under the new normal. We showed very clearly how we pivoted very quickly to a virtual format and had the ministers' meetings, the leaders meet virtually with very clear deliverables. So this year, New Zealand's hosting year, we will get to see more innovation to the format as well as to the work that we will be doing. And the second point is that in a crisis, really, APEC moves together. 2020, we saw how we came under threat, but we came together and reaffirmed our commitment to each other. Among other things, the joint pursuit of sustainability, inclusivity, resilience, not just for today, but also for future generations. There's a lot more to be done, and Bengalis has highlighted this. A number of work streams already in place. Key will be the traditional areas of trade and investment, but more importantly, the new areas of inclusivity and sustainability that's really going to take us forward this year, make us APEC value add to the global conversations around inclusivity and sustainability. Besides that, there's also work to ensure that post-pandemic recovery, what are we going to do? How would APEC contribute to post-COVID recovery? And that is a key area of work for this year. And our contribution, APEC's contribution, is also in preparing the ground. Vangelis talked about structural reform, but how do we prepare the ground? Getting policymakers ready, preparing them through capacity building, to sharing of best practices. This is the strength of APEC, incubating new ideas, as has been mentioned already. That's what we bring to the table, and we will see more of this year, given that we're operating in a different environment. How do we get these messages across? How do we bring our folks together as we've been so successful in doing it the past few years? I'll just stop there because we will be able to take questions and share more details of the work that we're doing going ahead. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr.